Okay, so the podcast is a It's so hard. So the podcast is called Public Display of Connection. It's a podcast where I have my favorite people on and they bring a poem that they like and then they read it, we discuss it, and then we get into more maybe deeper conversations and intimacy and talk about like where we connect and why we connect. And you might be thinking right now, hey, Aubrey, I don't like poetry. I don't get it. It makes me want to vom every time I look at it. And to that I say, maybe you just haven't read enough poems. Maybe you haven't read your poem yet that will really open you up to the idea of new ideas. And in the words of Walt Whitman, be curious, not judgmental. And you know, maybe you'll hear a poem that you connect with and you'll start racing to your local library or bookshop and screaming at the top of your lungs, where the hell is the poetry section? And I'll be waiting there in the next aisle, creepily watching you, saying, hey, I told you so, and I'll be happy for you. In this episode, we sit down with Frank Meyer, reading a poem by Shel Silverstein. We discuss being extroverts, things in childhood that shaped our identity, finding fun, Struwwelpeter, the A-team, and there's even a little ASMR for all you creeps out there. Come along for the ride. How are you?
Good.
It's going to get a little warm in here because it's the middle of summer in Southern California, and I feel like people have been complaining about the weather when it's cloudy, and then now they're complaining about it when it's hot, and I just realized people just complain about the weather here.
I think that Mother Nature heard their complaints and said, oh, really? Oh, you want me to want to remember what LA heat is really like? And all of a sudden it's like, we're under a magnifying glass.
Yeah, it's hot. It's definitely hot.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good.
Who are you? How did you end up in my house today?
Well, I broke in and you woke up early, and so I hid in the corner and then pretended to be a guest on your show.
I'm here under duress.
I'm Frank Meyer, and I am a musician and a filmmaker and an author, and I'm here to talk poetry, I think, with you.
Yeah.
The woman whose house I tried to break into very unsuccessfully.
You came here, held me hostage to talk poetry.
Yep.
That's usually how it happens.
I feel like that, and that's how you get good guests on a show too, you know?
Yeah. So how did we come to be friends? Would you call us friends?
I would call us friends and collaborators. We worked on stuff together professionally as well as, in a casual friendship manner. I met you when I was at Fender Musical Instruments. I was a director there.
I like that you say the full name.
Well, sure, the company that makes the Fender guitars. You and I worked there for a few years until the pandemic. And then during the pandemic, when, if you recall, everything shut down, and
I'm not familiar.
Yeah, it's sort of that 3-year gap we all have in our memories. And I asked you if you would be interested in making, kind of as a one-man band, music video. And the song was called Repetition Repeat, which she directed it, edited it, starred in it, and as I've told you many times, it's my favorite video that anyone's ever done for one of my songs. Ooh. I love it. And in fact, my new European-based hard rock band Trading Aces is updating that song and putting it on our new album. And so one of the guys in the band was like, oh, we'll have to make a video for it. I'm like, oh, no, we don't. I've got one already made.
I'm just waiting for, for things to take off.
Get ready.
In Europe.
Get ready. When this video comes out in Europe, your life's going to change. It's going to explode.
I have a couple of friends who are like, they're famous, but in like obscure European countries where like nobody here would know them. But if they go to like Finland or Sweden or something, everybody there's like, you're the guy from the
Why
thing.
do you think I just came back from touring Spain? Because my bands all toured Spain before. In Spain, I launched this new band called Trading Aces, and I kind of thought to really kick it off, we should go to Spain and do a tour because Spain is just a great place to tour for rock and roll.
Shout out to Spain.
Shout out to Spain. We We were signed to a Spanish label at one point. I did a couple records singing for James Williamson of the Stooges. The Stooges are huge in Spain.
Oh.
So I just kind of, and also I wrote a Ramones book. Ramones are huge in Spain. I was like,
you're just trying to move to Spain.
Kind of.
There's like a migration of people from LA moving to Spain.
I came back and pitched to my wife, who's, by the way, a Spanish teacher. I was like, what do you think about somewhere down the line we just moved to Spain? Like, we're into it.
And I've got friends in Mallorca and then in Barcelona, and I'm like, we're plotting and scheming.
Yeah.
What if we started a cult based in Spain?
I like it.
I'm just saying.
Why a cult?
I don't know. Because,
I mean, you could have said a band. You could have said let's do a film. You said a cult.
I just
why did your head go to cult?
I want everybody to like wear the same outfits and worship me.
You could do that in a band.
That's. Well,
I mean, that's literally the job of a lead singer. You know what I mean?
Okay,
you get everyone to wear outfits that compliment you, and you're the focal point of attention. Why do you think I got in this business? I mean, when you think about it, my gigs is I go between being the director on a set, which is sort of the guy telling everyone what to do, or the lead singer in a band where I'm the guy telling everyone what to do.
I guess we found our calling as casual cult leaders.
Yeah, or just that we're really bossy.
Yeah.
Maybe we just really like yelling at people, you know?
When you were a kid, did you find that like people listened to you? Because I feel like when I was younger, I was like kind of more quiet, and then I would get like kind of bulldozed over. And I was like, okay, like I'll speak up, and then I just got loud and never shut it down.
No, I was always a very kind of boisterous and lots of personality type kid. I think was probably the exact same that I am now. Back when I was a little kid, and people that knew me then, you know, will tell you, like, I definitely always was like, I could, as a little kid, I would talk to adults and they would get engaged with me because I didn't, like, I could have a real conversation with adults. They'd be like, this little kid is...
What's the word that they use where they're like, you're a real card?
You're a real cod, real cut up. And also my brother and I, like, we were the type of kids, which I think about it now as a father, I'm like, how annoying were we? But if my parents had company over, we would spend the whole day plotting like a play that we were going to put on or a lip sync thing, and we'd get our stuffed animals and like do a whole thing. So my poor parents would be in the middle of some dinner that they prepared, and all of a sudden we'd be like, hey everybody, welcome to the show, and they'd be like, oh my god, here we go again. It's no wonder that he went into acting, I went into music. Both of us do a lot of writing and, you know, producing and directing and all that kind of stuff. I mean, we're showbiz kids. I mean, we just always grew up around it. But I think even if we hadn't grown up around it, we would have probably ended up in that direction because both of us, I mean, I was more outgoing than him, but we both had personalities that were like, watch me, look at this thing I can do. Extroverted. Yeah, exactly.
That's fun. I feel like I'd love to be a fly on the wall for one of those like Frank Meyer originals. I wish there was some evidence of any of that. There's some photos. No, there's some photos, and no, the only thing there is, I believe, so along those lines, when I was in grade school, my friend Scott and I decided to put on a news show, like sort of inspired by Saturday Night Live, you know, the news segment on Saturday Night Live. And so we would write... I lost my water. Oh, I have your water. Oh! Hey. Sorry, it's so hot in here. You gave it to me before. I'm gonna die. Go on, sorry. We would write a news show about current events, either in the world as processed through our like fourth grade brains. I love that. Or like topical stuff like, teacher Gary's in the news today, that kind of stuff. And we would put on a show, and we went to our teachers. This is probably like the first gig I booked, which is we went to our teachers and was like, we would like you to give us 15 minutes a week to do our news program. And they were like, all right. And we would put it, and we would have special guest stars like other classmates, like, we're going to bring on a correspondent to talk about sports. And we'd have like the kid who's a good t-ball player would come and talk about the game. And, but so I was always doing stuff like that. So like the second that I started playing guitar, I got, a recorder so that I could start writing songs and recording them. And as soon as How old were you? That was probably like
12 when I was doing that. And then by the time I was, in like high school, maybe there was a film class, and I started making short films and just doing anything I could do to kind of be essentially a storyteller, a filmmaker, a poet. I mean, to this day I write songs every single day.
Yeah.
I mean,
did you write a song today?
Not yet, but I'm only because I'm mixing the Streetwalk and Cheetahs record, which are the songs I wrote, recently.
Maybe you'll write a song about your experience on this podcast.
No, that wouldn't be uncomfortable. But which is just to say, I mean, what are songs? They're rhyme schemes, they're prose, they're couplets, there's patterns going on as far as how you're using words, whether you're rhyming, what patterns you're using, whether you're ending every sentence or thought with it, or whether there's multiple rhymes going on within a sentence, so you're doing multiple rhymes. I mean, that's poetry. It's whether you call it songwriting, poetry. I mean, I don't know many people that are sitting down essentially daily and writing, couplets and prose. Whether I end up singing them or you end up reading them, we're sitting down with the same goal in mind, to tell a story in this one of multiple formats you can choose in the world of poetry or songwriting, or you decide to abandon all format. But it's all storytelling, I mean, what we did at Fender, on a small little level. I mean, guitar lessons, tutorials, stuff, that's not as much storytelling, but whenever we were doing like marketing type videos and pitching, getting them to sell guitars in terms of making those are all storytelling, short form TV commercials, writing songs, filmmaking, it's all variations of telling stories, and then it's just sort of what medium do you choose,
Yeah, I think there is something special about each one.
Sure. And they're all a little different too. It's not like just one thing you do, but but there's an overall approach, I think,
Yeah, it's all like people just trying to say like, this is who I am and this is what I think and this is what I've observed. And I've had like different experiences with poetry and music, and like there is something to poetry that I appreciate where it's like really reading it specifically brings me to kind of like a stillness or a space that like music kind of like can make you invoke emotions in a different way.
Sure.
Where just like the like reading, like taking like a little poetry book somewhere and reading it, it really kind of just feels like a meditation.
Well, and also you're getting to provide the tempo to that. Whereas music inherently has a tempo. It's a slow song, it's a fast song. And regardless of what the lyrics are, the tempo and the sound of the music, the audio qualities are going into processing what you think of this and what emotions doing. When you take all that away, then you get to provide. So you're the one that's deciding that there's a breathlessness to this cadence, or that like this is a lazy, just trying to read it real slow. And like the writer might have their own idea of what this poem is supposed to invoke emotionally, or sort of what the cadence and tempo is. But by the time it gets to you, you're filling in whatever you want. Yeah. And then you get to process what it means to you. So when you add music, or for that matter, visuals too, to just the word, then you're already kind of manipulating, not in a bad way, but you're manipulating what the viewer or what the the experience is. Whereas poetry to me, or just the written word, is kind of like the most raw version of an idea, because it's just the words, and everything else, from the images that that come to your mind, to the pacing of it, and how, whether it's you're taking it as serious or lighthearted, all of that is kind of your brain processing that based on the word, and they're not giving you any other cues.
It's also interesting too with poetry, you are taking something that's very personal and kind of like giving it to the other person, that it is saying like, you can take this how you want, but also like I have a very specific meaning behind stuff that I write, and there's an intention there, and there's something specific I'm trying to communicate, but it also is an interesting thing to be like, here's my baby. I hope that you don't take it the wrong way, but then I guess if somebody gets some sort of experience from it, that's the goal. I find a lot of poetry kind of does that a little too much, where I think that there's like a place for that. But then I feel like that's something that I see a lot of, where people will write something and then be like, get whatever you want out of it. But then the whole time I'm like, I don't know what this means.
Yeah.
I'm doing all the work here.
Right. If it's too vague, then it's like, sometimes when you watch these really, really artsy films where you're like, I know this is all supposed to be really, really important, but I don't understand what I'm watching.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like cool to be esoteric and vague. You have to give them some cues, some idea of what they have here in their hand. Something, you're giving them kind of a start. Like, hey, I'm going to tell you this story, but you can fill in some of the blanks. But if they don't have an idea of what your actual intention is, then what's the point? Then it's just a bunch of words.
I just got an idea. A poem that's just purely exposition. I'm going to tell you all of the information that you need to know. And then it just is like the whole thing.
That's like
they
used to have a magazine called Reader's Digest. That's what Reader's Digest was. Here's all the information with no personality.
Yeah.
Life magazine. Life magazine, it was like that too. Like, we've done a very dry interview with a very important person for a long amount of time, and we begin. You're like, whoa.
Speaking of interesting people, you brought a poem today to read by a very interesting man who I delved a little bit into more. Yeah. Who I've been. It's
a very fascinating career.
Yeah, like,
and he has
guy.
a whole music career, and that his music career is like pop songs and like nudie songs, and like they're all like. Kind of like if Arlo Guthrie was really foul-mouthed. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, he has a song called The Great Smoke-Off about like two people smoking joints until only one survives.
We should do that.
Like,
right now.
Yeah, there's the rest of the show.
Wait, who are we reading?
So Shel Silverstein is the author that we're talking about, and he is a poet from 60s, 70s, 80s. His most famous works are Where the Sidewalk Ends and A Light in the Attic and The Giving Tree. And The Giving Tree is probably his most famous, and that's one of his few books that tells like a linear story, whereas the rest are more like poetry anthology books. They're just collections of his poetry with drawings that he would do for them as well. And my mom, and I'm sure this has a lot to do with why my brother and I were so, I keep putting my leg up and then realizing that it's probably right at the bottom. Right?
It's okay, your shorts are framed out.
Sure they are.
Show a little leg,
let's
Frank.
See. Hold on, can I see it? Okay. No, I see the knee. Damn you, Aubrey. This is why I always, when people say something's framed out, I do the investigation myself. Anyways, I'm sure something, that there has to be some connection between the fact that when my brother and I were little kids, we were read Shel Silverstein poetry and Dr. Seuss poetry it's my earliest memories.
Yeah.
And one thing that I always liked about Shel Silverstein, certainly as a little kid, but I think it had a big influence on me as a writer, and kind of going back to what we were just talking about. Shel Silverstein's a poet where there's certainly, in a book like The Giving Tree, there's a lot of messages in that.
Yeah.
But in these short stories, a lot of them are just goofy and funny and weird. And as a kid, I loved that. And I knew that there was meaning behind some of them, and that some of them did not seem to have a lot of meaning besides just being like fun and funny and evoking some weird thoughts or whatever.
Whimsical.
Whimsical, exactly. I think that I always took that as something that I learned kind of about art, or certainly with music, which is that it does not all have to be about you or important. It can just be fun sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Frank Zappa, for instance, and one thing I love about Frank Zappa is he was a very complicated musician who wrote very complex music. But his favorite song of all time was Louie Louie. And like, he understood the importance of like just a dumbbell rock song that doesn't mean anything. Louie Louie, oh, we gotta go now. Doesn't mean anything. Like Wooly Bully, Wooly Bully. Yeah, Wooly Bully. Wooly Bully.
Wait, is
Wooly
that the
Bully.
same song?
No, but they kinda, but no, they're different songs, same era, but Surfing Bird, 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 Bird. These songs don't mean anything.
I know that one.
There's no hidden meaning. They're just supposed to be fun songs to make you want to dance.
Yeah.
And I realized one thing that I learned from, guys like Shel Silverstein and Dr. Seuss is that you can have this mix or choice as to whether you're telling personal stories, whether you're trying to say something important about a topic, or whether you're just being fun and goofy. There's a place for all of that in art and in music and in films and in writing. And sometimes those can all come from the same brain. You don't have to be one or the other. Like, so when I write songs, a lot of times they're a lot like this poem I'm about to read you.
Yeah.
Because they're just these sort of crazy stories that could be like a movie. Two people try to rob a bank. It all goes horribly awry. One guy gets shot in the neck. They run off in a getaway car and they all get killed at the end. Boom. That's a song.
Yeah.
Or a movie. Or an episode of the A-Team.
Yeah, it's storytelling. Oh my gosh, when I was in Italy, there was only like a couple of shows, like American shows that they would have on their channels. And one of them was the A-Team. And ever. I watched it as a kid and I revisited it. And I was like, they did this part where they were trying to get away from somebody and they were driving their van. And they were like, well, how are we going to hide out from them? And they're like, I know. They took the entire van apart, buried it, before these guys who were chasing them
got
like
there. 15 minutes away.
Yeah, and they buried it.
And then like reconstructed it and got the hell out of Dodge.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Because they're an A-level team. I mean, their teamwork is not at a B or C level. Anyways, most conversations with me end up taking a Mr. T turn. I didn't want to let you know. You didn't fumble this interview. It was going to go here anyway. So
the way we do things here is we kind of fly by the seat of our pants and let it go where it goes.
Sweet.
So you're reading a poem by Shel Silverstein.
Yeah, and there's an illustration that I believe he wrote or drew all the illustrations for it. It's a kid with an arrow in his side, two guns, riding the hell out of this very exhausted looking horse.
Take it away, Frank.
All right, so this story is called True Story. This morning I jumped on my horse and went out for a ride, and some wild outlaws chased me, and they shot me in the side. So I crawled into a wildcat's cave to find a place to hide, but some pirates found me sleeping there, and soon they had me tied to a pole and built a fire under me. I almost cried, till a mermaid came and cut me loose and begged to be my bride. So I said I'd come back Wednesday, but I must admit I lied. Then I ran into a jungle swamp, but I forgot my guide. And I stepped into some quicksand, and no matter how I tried, I couldn't get out until I met a water snake named Clyde, who pulled me to some cannibals who planned to have me fried. But an eagle came and swooped me up, and through the air we flied. But he dropped me in a boiling lake 1,000 miles wide, and you'll never guess what I did then. I died. And so, first off, I think as a kid, it blew my mind that he dies at the end.
Oh.
Like, you don't see that. Not many poems are in first person and then acknowledge, like, and then I died at the end.
Yeah.
So as a kid, I was like, but wait a second. Did he write this right before he died? And then I died.
You're like trying to make sense
or I was like,
out
or
of
did
it?
he write it in the afterlife? Or did he write it as a ghost? What was that? Did we just hear a ghost?
Oh my God.
What was that?
It was a ghost.
Oh, that's cool. You have ghosts here?
Yeah.
Oh, this is Hollywood, so yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Ghosts and helicopters, drug dealers.
Who's dealing? Oh wait, I was talking about drugs earlier.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I definitely read Shel Silverstein as a kid, and I think my cousin had a book, or we never actually had a book of his, but I always remembered really enjoying it. But there's a German version of this where it's cautionary tales for kids from Germany. It's called Struwwelpeter.
Oh, I feel like maybe.
Do you watch The Office? Dwight brings it.
Yeah, maybe that's where I've heard of it. Yeah.
And it's the German version of this. But it's if you suck your thumb, Struwwelpeter will come with these giant scissors and chop it off. And there are all these poems and stuff
Grimm's
about
fairy
it.
tales, but it's whimsical poems.
Yeah, and there's one about a girl that plays with matches. She bursts into flames.
Oh, that's cool.
And then she's a pile of ashes with kittens crying tears into her. There's one about like a kid who doesn't eat and then he starves to death and he gets like skinnier and skinnier. I think we read that first and then Shel Silverstein, and I was like, oh, this is much better.
These aren't quite as dark.
Yeah, but slightly still dark.
So this book is the actual book that my mom got me as a kid that I've kept my whole life because it's like my favorite book.
Yeah.
And what I realized when I had my daughter and I pulled the book out to start reading to her at a young age, these disturbing poems like I was read to, I realized that I had drawn throughout the whole book in crayon. These drawings are still there. So for instance, there's this poem called Invisible Boy. And here we see the invisible boy in his lovely invisible house feeding a piece of invisible cheese to a little invisible mouse. Oh, what a beautiful picture to see. Will you draw an invisible picture for me? And I did. So I drew what I assume was my version of me. Because I do have a top hat and orange skin and purple features.
That's how I know
that's
you.
For sure.
You're usually wearing a top hat.
And then there's this other one, Magical Eraser.
Oh wow.
And I filled in the person because the kid is erased with a magical eraser, his friend, and they only show you like the eyes and the hair. And I was like, well, that's not fair. So I redrew the imaginary body so that they weren't left embarrassed.
Little Frank Meyer
and
just wanted the world to be fair.
Yeah. And in this one, I just thought that the Brontosaurus clearly would be green or purple.
Well,
because,
Barney.
Yeah.
Or wait, Barney probably wasn't a thing when you were a kid.
No, but I mean, I feel like just little kids, we just assume everything's crazy colors,
Yeah.
And then the coolest part about this is that my daughter, when she got a hold of it, drew and signed it, which was very influenced by her dad thing to do.
Yeah.
So Bella signed this page in 1907, in 2000, in 2007, which means she's 2003, so she would have been 4 years old.
She's a Victorian ghost. Speaking of ghosts.
Yeah.
Did you watch that video, the Shel Silverstein video that I sent you, where he's like on a boat with these hippie musicians and stuff? I watched that video and I was like, oh my God, he's so fucking cool.
Oh, yeah.
I want to hang out with those people. And it was such a nice, it was a nice thing to see somebody who you imagine would be like a quirky bird and kind of very fun and extroverted, who actually was.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I was like, oh, he's
and it
so
also
cool.
makes the fact that he was a musician who was writing these essentially children's stories, but then his music was clearly for adults.
Did you know that he wrote A Boy Named Sue for Johnny Cash?
I did.
I didn't know that.
Well, I believe, I could be wrong about this, but was it that he wrote it for Johnny Cash, or were the lyrics taken from one of his poems?
Oh, it could be either way.
I'm not sure. It might very well be that he wrote it for Johnny Cash, or it might have been one of his songs. But yes, he wrote that song.
Yeah, he wrote that song, and then Johnny Cash decided to play it for his, is it Folsom Prison album?
Yeah.
And that was the first time that he ever played it. He didn't rehearse it or anything. I could fact check this later.
Yeah,
but that's what the internet told me.
Yes, I think you're essentially right about that. Ballpark of being correct.
I'm internet amount of right. What's right anymore anyways?
Fake news. Can we break it for?
It's hot.
I'm sweating.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. So we had to take a popsicle break.
Yeah,
because it's hot as balls in here.
It is.
We can't have the AC going with the sound.
No, because that's amateur move to have the sound in the background, and we're production professionals, so we know to do that. And we also, I'd like to point out, are willing to suffer for the art.
And we know that the ASMR community loves people eating on camera.
Sure. Who doesn't love to watch people eat?
We should just have a clip of us just eating our popsicles, or it's that music that's ring, 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 ding, 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 game shows.
Yeah, that's the music that's going on in my head most of the day. Ding, 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 ding. I gotta tell you, most podcasts don't offer popsicles. I've been on quite a few. First one I've ever been offered a popsicle. So, cheers to you.
Oh, COVID.
COVID.
So I haven't seen a film about Shel Silverstein, and we were talking about it this morning, and we were like, there are 3 people who could play him and just kill it. One would be Oscar Isaac, another would be Jake Johnson, and then I forget the third.
I don't know, but you know who comes to my mind?
Who?
Common.
What?
I think Common. For one thing, I've never my whole life, because all photos of Shel Silverstein are black and white, I honestly have never quite known whether he's black or white.
He's Jewish.
He's Jewish and he's white. I know that now.
Yeah.
But I never really knew that. So, like, in my head, I see it as Common. A really good looking, rugged black man with a way of words. Like, that to me, I don't know. Somehow that's what I see as Shel Silverstein. I know it's wrong, obviously, but
he could.
And
he could do whatever he wants.
And I was going to say, isn't Common the kind of guy you'd be like, yeah, I buy him as a poet or an assassin or a lover or a chef or whatever. He's just like
a lover or a chef.
Guy's got it going on. Well, I don't know.
Do you have a crush on Common? Are you?
I might have a little crush on Common.
Just trying to reach out to Common via this popular podcast that he'll probably be listening to?
No, my agent's already reached out to his agent to try to set up a date. It hasn't gone well. No, I don't know. I'm just saying that for some reason I want to see Common play Shel Silverstein. I want to see Common play a white Jewish poet from the 60s. That's, to me, what I think would be a good casting move. But you know me, I think outside the box.
And outside the bun.
Got that right.
This is a podcast sponsored by Taco Bell.
You're going to need to loop that into it.
You were saying that you had written a song that was inspired of the Shel Silverstein poem. Would you like to share it?
It's not so much a song so much as like almost all my songs. I like we were talking about before, I tend to write songs or there are different types of songs that one can write. Sometimes you write these personal songs, these more serious songs, and sometimes you write just kind of like a cool story that just seems fun. And a lot of my songs, because I play in punk rock and roll and metal bands, a lot of my songs tend to be these, kind of like very cinematic, adventures, because they
tell stories.
Yeah, they're stories,
they spin yarns.
And they also specifically tend to tell sort of, violent stories, because in the context of playing, fast rock and roll, those kind of lyrics can be kind of effective. You want like action words, and cursing works great in rock and roll, and just a lot of stuff that,
I'm in real life.
I don't have a history of violence and robbing banks and, punching people out with broken glass or whatever. Allegedly, to your knowledge. But I do write a lot of those kind of songs because they're just fun rock and roll sort of, subject matter, and they work for the kind of music I do. I realized when we talked about doing this podcast, and, this was the first poem that came to mind, because it was really the first kind of poem that I loved.
Yeah.
And when I went back and reread it, I was like, oh my God, like, no wonder, like, that this poem pops to mind, because like it's basically the format of most of my kind of like action rock lyrics.
Isn't that crazy? Like when you're young and you just like latch onto something.
Totally digested this thing and didn't really realize it. And then
it shapes you.
So here's a random song. This one is not even released. Last year I did a record with Eddie Spaghetti of the Super Suckers, and it was like we teamed up and made an album together, kind of like two outlaw country punk guys,
Eating spaghetti. Well,
Spaghetti and Frank, we both have food references in our name. It writes itself. You can imagine the record company was thrilled at the food, rock, punk connection.
Oh, yeah.
When I reread the poem, I realized that this particular poem and the way it's kind of telling this sort of never-ending action story of this character that dies at the end, I realize now, when I reread that, I was like, oh, I've written so many songs that are kind of slight variations on that sort of like, here's some crazy adventure I got in.
Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah, Bonnie and Clyde type stuff. It's not that I personally have robbed a series of banks. That's certainly true. Not true. But, this is what art is. You fantasize, you write things that just seem cool or fun. So here's a song I wrote recently. This would be potentially for the next record I'm doing with Eddie Spaghetti from the Super Suckers, and the song is called Partners in Crime.
Nice.
And it says, me and Eddie had a history of violence. He had a short fuse and I was on edge. So when the bank teller hesitated, Eddie got nervous, put a hollow point slug right in the back of his head. Then the cops rolled up and the sirens began to spill. I took the manager hostage and said, I'll shoot to kill. And just when I thought I was a goner for surely, Eddie took a shot at yours truly. And when he hit the floor, bullets started flying, partners in crime. So I kicked in the back door to make my escape, jumped in my getaway car a block away. 22 police sirens started firing. 22 police started firing. Eddie took one in the back of the neck and kept driving. Made it to Mexico. I ain't lying, partners in crime. I hope you don't mind dying, partners in crime.
Yeah.
And so, again, it's kind of like, hey, I got this crazy story with this guy. Everyone gets killed. I'm off to Mexico. Does he live or does he die? And I realized that probably that whole idea of writing those type of songs came from reading this poem as a kid and kind of going, that's what poetry can be like? You can just say crazy shit about anything you want or anything you'd want to do. I could ride team up with a boa constrictor and ride a horse and be a cowboy. And that drawing is basically, I think, how I still see myself. That's me. Yeah. I see that, this is me then, this is me now, this is how I want to be.
Yeah. Adventure. So true story says, this morning I jumped on my horse and went out for a ride, and some wild outlaws chased me and they shot me in the side. So I crawled into a wildcat's cave to find a place to hide. But some pirates found me sleeping there, and soon they had me tied to a pole and built a fire under me. I almost cried till a mermaid came and cut me loose and begged to be my bride. So I said I'd come back Wednesday, but I must admit I lied. Then I ran into a jungle swamp, but I forgot my guide. And I stepped into some quicksand. And no matter how I tried, I couldn't get out until I met a water snake named Clyde, who pulled me to some cannibals who planned to have me fried. But an eagle came and swooped me up, and through the air we flied. But he dropped me in a boiling lake 1,000 miles wide. And you'll never guess what I did then. I died. I love how Shel Silverstein is so fun and indulgent. And did you know that he lived in the Playboy Mansion for a while?
I think I did know that. I think because he wrote some stuff for Playboy too. I think he wrote a bunch of articles and
lot.
Stuff. Yeah, and I think during that time he was, rolling with hef. Who knows? You could only imagine what those parties are like.
Yeah, he just had such a sense of fun exploration, silliness, and making things whimsical in this way that, even though some of his stuff does have meaning and depth to it, it's still done in a way where it's life is crazy, right? It's just silly.
And even if, in this case, the subject matter is dark, meaning what he's talking about is a guy getting chased to his death. And then, drowning, gets eaten by cannibals and drowning in quicksand. And then the hero dies at the end. Yeah. Normally you wouldn't say, honey, would you like Daddy to read you a story? In this one, the character dies.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't know about death yet? Well, let's get into it. But Shel takes all that dark stuff and makes it this whimsical, fantastical adventure where somehow the fact that this child protagonist dies at the end doesn't strike you as even dark when you read it, because also, like you said, he adds so much flavor. It's not just that a snake tries to eat him, it's a snake named Clyde.
Yeah, it's
which kind of makes you go
silliness.
As a kid I was like, how would he even know that this, did he get no he's laying there and the snake, and then he's like, sir, before we get into this, let's introduce ourselves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just that level of detail when you're a kid especially gets your brain just kind of filling in all those gaps, going so snakes have names? How would I do I ask one? How do I find out? And how did Shel find out the snake's name was Clyde?
Would you say that his kind of mentality towards life is similar to your own, of his approach to just kind of how you take on life?
I would certainly say that I'm someone who is generally a positive, looking at things in a positive manner, and I consider myself generally a fun, upbeat guy. Don't get me wrong, like everyone else, I have a dark side. I can get angry. There's all sorts of things. You've seen me get angry. We were at Fender together.
We'll stick you in a hot room, and anybody will lose their mind.
Yeah. It's not like I'm doing hour-long podcast in a hot, sweaty room in an apartment
I gave you a
with no air
popsicle.
conditioning, and I'm paid in a popsicle. No, I mean, why would I be angry about that? No, but I'm saying, like, I think in general, you know, one of the ways that I've kept working, not as a musician, but as a director, is that I'm a guy, you know, if you're going to be trapped with someone for 8 hours making digital tutorial content or whatever, you'd kind of prefer that your teammates be like fun to be around and not a drag, or like, boy, does work get, even if you're making content or doing, you know, creative stuff, if you're surrounded by a bunch of assholes, it's not that fun after a while, no matter what you're doing.
You got to make life fun.
You got to make life fun. So I think that if there was an influence in terms of like what you said with philosophical or life influence, I certainly think it's going into things and trying to find the fun and the funny and making people or trying to help people enjoy their time with you or their work with you, so that people walk away from their experience with you when they work, and the work that I do and you do tends to be in the creative field, going like, well, that was a pleasure. That was fun.
Yeah.
Like, hey, if I'm going to do this again, I want it to be with that team or that director, you know, because I enjoyed the work. Sometimes the work itself isn't even fun unless you make it enjoyable for people. You know?
Well, I always enjoyed working with you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
We did have fun.
Yeah, we had fun.
I will say that every time I order a Jersey Mike's tuna sub, I get flashbacks of our days at Fender, because we were only allowed to choose between several things on a very short. No, I mean, we were given a small budget for food. So, and we were in, you know,
Mine is Zanko chicken. I can't eat
we had a lot
again.
of I can't eat that anymore. That being said, every time I eat a Jersey Mike's tuna sandwich, I kind of go,
You think of me. That's
I get like a tick in my eye, and I go, there's
that's
Aubrey.
Sweet. That's sweet. Well, usually when we wrap this up, we
wrap it up. What? You said I had an hour straight. We didn't count those breaks and the popsicles as part of the hour.
Oh, the popsicles
my clock
are
says
going
35 more minutes of this crap.
I mean, you can sit in the heat.
There's like 300 poems in this book.
Oh my goodness. Would you like to plug anything?
Yeah, sure. Oh my God, of course. I got some incredible work.
A quick plug and then...
Yeah. I started recently thefrankmeyer.com because I thought America's starved, and people aren't putting the pieces, connecting the dots between Frank Meyer the author, Frank Meyer the filmmaker, Frank Meyer the singer of 1,000 different bands. So I thought I should
Frank Meyer, the guy with the 2 hot dog names.
Right. Yes, Oscar Meyer, Frank, Ballpark Frank, multiple hot dog references in my name. I'm famous for it. But so The Frank Meyer is where you can find my music and my writing and my film stuff all in one place.
Gorgeous.
And all my social medias on Instagram and Threads and,
we'll put it right
and
here.
Facebook.
You want to hold it up?
Are all
tickle it a little bit.
Are all The Frank Meyer, Meyer, M-E-Y-E-R. Yeah,
it'll be on the screen.
Fabulous. Oh, and these kids can read, right? So we're no problem.
No promises.
You need that VO voice? I got you.
Hell yeah.
On Instagram at thefrankmeyer.com.
Flames.
Flames. Explosions. Boobs.
All right.
That's what your show's all about, right?
Yeah. Poetry and boobs and flames. So to wrap it up, we do a little hug. Is that cool?
Yeah, it's going to be a sweaty hug.
I know.
This is going to be a really gross hug.
Brother.
Oh, okay.
Bring the mics out.
Get ready. Let's mic it, because it's probably going to be a squishy sound.
Ready?
Oh, now there's like trail of... Oh
my God.
Goopy.
Thank you for doing this. I always appreciate your company and your... fervor for life in the living.
Fervor, I think that's how it's pronounced.
Fervor.
That's a German word. That's the other book with the short stories.
Oh my God.
the fervor is the one where all the kids die.
With the real German. Oh my God, it's so hot in here. I can't.
It is 1,000 degrees right now. We need 20 more popsicles, please.
And that's